Never mind, I just ain't going they route. Know what they own, what they bout, and I ain't got the time.
Listen, they always mean well. They always say there's more to it. Look at the details. They always say they going through
today
it.
I want
Life
to do
is a
something
female. Dog, that would
quite
be
different
me.
than what I've done in the past with these videos. Before, it's been me exploring different ideas in terms of how I view the Bible, the Old Testament specifically. Today, what I want to do is I want to read a portion of a book, a couple pages, and kind of just let them sit there, because in reading what I'm going to read today, I want to do so not just for reasons of what's going on culturally or socially and politically, although those are important things that I think are within this discussion, but I think he hits on something in here that I'm trying to do and learn myself. And why I'm putting it here is, like, I'm trying to do what he's talking about with this podcast. And so I just hope that it's helpful to anybody who's going to listen. So without further ado, what I'm going to read today is from 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. I've been following Dr. Peterson for probably a year now, pretty heavily. And I finally started reading his book, and I'm mostly through it with it. I'm on Rule 10 now, or Rule 11. And just for fun, there's my bookmark. Got to see him last winter. That was a lot of fun. Definitely a highlight. But yeah, so what I'm going to read is from Rule 9. Assume that the person you're listening to knows something you don't. For those who have ears, let him hear. Rule 9. Assume the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Not advice. Psychotherapy is not advice. Advice is what you get when the person you're talking with about something terrible and complicated wishes you would just shut up and go away. Advice is what you get when the person you're talking to wants to revel in the superiority of his or her own intelligence. If you are so stupid, after all, you wouldn't have your stupid problems. Psychotherapy is genuine conversation. Genuine conversation is exploration, articulation, and strategizing. When you're involved in a genuine conversation, you're listening and talking, but mostly listening. Listening is paying attention. It's amazing what people will tell you if you listen. Sometimes, if you listen to people, they will even tell you what's wrong with them. Sometimes they will even tell you how they plan to fix it. Sometimes that helps you fix something wrong with yourself. One surprising time, and this is only one occasion of many, which such things have happened, I was listening to someone very carefully, and she told me within minutes, A, that she was a witch, and B, that her witch convent spent a lot of time visualizing world peace together. She was a long-time, lower-level functionary in some bureaucratic job. I would never have guessed that she was a witch. I also didn't know that witch convents spent any of their time visualizing world peace. I didn't know what to make of it either, but it wasn't boring, and that's something. In my clinical practice, I talk and listen. I talk more to some people and listen more to others. Many of the people I listen to have no one else to talk to. Some of them are truly alone in the world. There are far more people like that than you think. You don't meet them because they're alone. Others are surrounded by tyrants or narcissists or drunks or traumatized people or professional victims. Some are not good at articulating themselves. They go off on tangents, they repeat themselves, they say vague and contradictory things. They're hard to listen to. Others have terrible things happening around them. They have parents with Alzheimer's or sick children. There's no such time left over for their personal concerns. One time, a client who I had been seeing for a few months came into my office for a scheduled appointment, and after some brief preliminaries, she announced, "I think I was raped." It's not easy to know how to respond to a statement like that, although there's frequently some mystery around such events. Often alcohol is involved, as it is in most sexual assault cases. Alcohol can cause ambiguity. That's partially why people drink. Alcohol temporarily lifts the terrible burden of self-consciousness for people. Drunk people know about the future, but they don't care about it. That's exciting. That's exhilarating. Drunk people can party like there's no tomorrow. But because there is a tomorrow, most of the time, drunk people also get in trouble. They black out. They go to dangerous places with careless people. They have fun, but they also get raped. So I immediately thought something like that might be involved. How else to understand, I think? But that wasn't the end of the story. She added an extra detail. 5 times. The first sentence was awful enough, but the second produced something unfathomable. 5 times? What could that possibly mean? My client told me that she would go to bars and have a few drinks. Someone would start talking with her. She would end up at his place or her place with him. The evening would proceed inevitably to its sexual climax. The next day she would wake up, uncertain about what happened, uncertain about her motives, uncertain about his motives, and uncertain about the world. Miss S, we'll call her, was vague to the point of non-existence. She was a ghost of a person. She dressed, however, like a professional. She knew how to present herself for first appearances. In consequence, she had finagled her way into a government advisory board considering the construction of a major piece of transportation infrastructure, even though she knew nothing about government, advising, or construction. She also hosted a local public access radio show dedicated to small business, even though she had never held a real job and knew nothing about being an entrepreneur. She had been receiving welfare payments for the entirety of her adulthood. Her parents had never provided her with a minute of attention. She had 4 brothers, and they were not all that good to her. She had no friends now, and none in the past. She had no partner. She had no one to talk to, and she didn't know how to think on her own. That's not rare. She had no self. She was, instead, a walking cacophony of unintegrated experiences. I tried previously to help her find a job. I asked her if she had a CV. She said yes. I asked her to bring it to me. She brought it to our next session. It was 50 pages long. It was in a file-folded box, divided into sections with manila tag separators, the ones with the little colorful index markers on the inside. The sections included such topics as my dreams and books I have read. She had written down dozens of her nighttime dreams in the My Dreams section and provided brief summaries and reviews of her reading material. That was what she proposed to send to prospective employers, or perhaps already had, who really knows. People like her are the reason that the many forms of psychotherapy currently practiced all work. People can be so confused that their psyches will be ordered and their lives improved by the adoption of any reasonably orderly system of interpretation. This is the bringing together of the desperate elements of their lives into a disciplinary manner, any disciplined manner. So, if you've come apart at the seams, or if you never have been together at all, you can reconstruct your life on Freudian, Jungian, Adlerian, Rogerian, or behavioral principles. At least then you make sense. At least then you're coherent. At least then you might be good for something, if not good yet for everything. You can't fix a car with an axe, but you can cut down a tree. That's still something. About the same time I was seeing this client, the media was all afire with stories of recovering memories, particularly of sexual assault. The dispute raged apace. Were these genuine accounts of past trauma, or were they post hoc constructions, dreamed up as a consequence of pressure, wittingly or unwittingly applied by incautious therapists, grasped onto desperately by the clinical clients, all too eager to find a simple cause for all their trouble? Sometimes it was the former, perhaps, and sometimes the latter. I understood much more clearly and precisely, however, how easily it might be to instill a false memory into the mental landscape as soon as my client revealed her uncertainty about her sexual experiences. The past appears fixed, but it is not in an important psychological sense. There's an awful lot of the past after all, and the way we organize it can be subject to drastic revision. Imagine, for example, a movie where nothing but terrible things happen, but in the end, everything works out. Everything is resolved. A sufficiently happy ending can change the meaning of all the previous events. They can all be viewed as worthwhile given that ending. Now imagine another movie. A lot of things are happening. They're all exciting and interesting, but there are a lot of them. 90 minutes in, you start to worry. This is a great movie, you think. But there are a lot of things going on. I sure hope the filmmaker can pull it all together. But that doesn't happen. Instead, the story ends abruptly, unresolved, or some facile and cliched occurs. You leave deeply annoyed and unsatisfied, failing to notice that you were fully engaged and enjoying the movie almost the whole time you were in the theater. The present can change the past, and the future can change the present. When you're remembering the past as well, you remember some parts of it and forget others. You have clear memories of some things that happened, but not others, of potentially equal importance. Just as in the present, you are unaware of some aspects of your surroundings and unconscious of others. You categorize your experience, grouping some elements together, and separate them from the rest. There is a mysterious arbitrariness about all of this. You don't form a comprehensive, objective record. You can't. You just don't know enough. You just can't perceive enough. You're not objective either. You're alive. You're subjective. You have vested interest, at least in yourself, at least usually. What exactly should be included in the story? What exactly is the border between events? The sexual abuse of children is distressingly common. However, it's not as common as poorly trained therapists think, and it also does not always produce terribly damaged adults. People vary in their resilience. An event that will wipe one person out can be shrugged off by another. But therapists with a little secondhand knowledge of Freud often axiomatically assume that a distressed adult in their practice must have been subject to childhood sexual abuse. Why else would they be distressed? So they dig and infer and intimate and suggest and overreact and bias and tilt. They exaggerate the importance of some events and downplay the importance of others. They trim the facts to fit their theory, and they convince their client that they were sexually abused. If they could only remember. And the client starts to remember. And then they start to accuse. And sometimes what they remember never happened, and the people accused are innocent. The good news? At least the therapist's theory remained intact. That's good for the therapist. But there's no shortage of collateral damage. However, people are often willing to produce a lot of collateral damage if they can retain their theory. I knew all about this when Miss S came to me about her sexual experiences. When she recounted her trip to the singles bars and their recurring aftermath, I thought a bunch of things at once. I thought, you're so vague and so non-existent. You're a denizen of chaos in the underworld. You're going 10 different places at the same time. Anyone can take you by the hand and guide you down the road of their choosing. After all, if you're not the leading man in your own drama, you're a bit player in someone else's, and you might well be assigned to play a dismal, lonely, and tragic part. After Miss S recounted her story, we sat there. I thought, you have normal sexual desires. You're extremely lonely. You're unfulfilled sexually. You're afraid of men and ignorant of the world and know nothing of yourself. You wander around like an accident waiting to happen, and the accident happens, and that's your life. I thought, part of you wants to be taken. Part of you wants to be a child. You are abused by your brothers and ignored by your father, and so part of you wants revenge upon men. Part of you is guilty. Another part is ashamed. Another part is thrilled and excited. Who are you? What did you do? What happened? What is the objective truth? There was no way of knowing the objective truth, and there never would be. There was no objective observer, and there never would be. There was no complete and accurate story. Such a thing did not and could not exist. There were and are only partial accounts and fragmentary viewpoints. But some are still better than others. Memory is not a description of the objective past. Memory is a tool. Memory is the past guide to the future. If you remember that something bad happened, and you can figure out why, then you can try to avoid that bad thing happening again. That's the purpose of memory. It's not to remember the past. It's to stop the same damn thing from happening over and over. I thought, I could simplify Miss S.'s life. I could say that her suspicions of rape were fully justified, and that her doubt about the events was nothing but additional evidence of her thorough and long-term victimization. I could insist that her sexual partners had a legal obligation to ensure that she was not impaired by alcohol to give consent. I could tell that she had indisputably been subject to violent and illicit acts, unless she had consented to each sexual move explicitly and verbally. I could tell her that she was an innocent victim. I could have told her all that, and it would have been true, and she would have accepted it as true, and remembered it for the rest of her life. She would have been a new person, with a new history, and a new destiny. But I also thought I could tell her that she wanders into bars like a courtesan in a coma, and that she is a danger to herself and others, that she needs to wake up, and that if she goes to singles bars and drinks too much and is taken home and has rough sex, or even tender caring sex, then what the hell does she expect? In other words, I could have told her in more philosophical terms that she was Nietzsche's pale criminal, the person who at one moment dares to break the sacred law, and at the next shrinks from paying its price. And that would have been true too, and she would have accepted it as such and remembered it. If I had been the adherent of a left-wing socially justice ideology, I would have told her the first story. If I had been the adherent of a conservative ideology, I would have told her the second. And her response, after having been told either the first or the second story, would have proved to my satisfaction and hers that the story I told her was true, completely, irrefutably true. And that would have been advice. I decided instead to listen. I've learned not to steal my clients' problems from them. I didn't want to be the redeeming hero or the deus ex machina, not in someone else's story. I don't want their lives, so I asked her to tell me what she thought, and I listened. She talked a lot. When we were finished, she still didn't know if she'd been raped, and neither did I. Life is very complicated. Sometimes you have to change the way you understand everything to properly understand a single something. Was I raped can be a very complicated question. The mere fact that the question would present itself in that form indicates the existence of infinite layers of complexity, to say nothing of 5 times. There are a myriad of questions hidden inside, was I raped? Was it rape? What is consent? What constitutes appropriate sexual caution? How should a person defend herself? Where does the fault lie? Was I raped is a hydra. If you cut off the head of the hydra, 7 more grow. That's life. Miss S would have had to talk for 20 years to figure out whether she had been raped, and someone would have had to been there to listen. I started the process, but circumstances made it impossible for me to finish. She left therapy with me only somewhat less ill-informed and vague than when she had first met me. But at least she didn't leave the living embodiment of my damned ideology. If you enjoyed what I just read, you might enjoy the podcast episode that I put out on the same content, where I elaborate a little more on how I think this rule can get implemented in your life in a couple different ways, how I've tried to implement it in my own life. I think it's a valuable conversation I'd like to invite you all into. And if you like the podcast, you might find some conversations there that are interesting to you, that pique your curiosity about other things that I like to talk about. Who knows? I might do a whole series on Jordan's rules. If you're there, give us a rate, give us a review. Every little bit helps. So I appreciate everyone who has been listening diligently. Your support does not go unnoticed, as well as those of you who are tuning into the videos who might be finding this for the first time. Thank you for joining me. I am just trying to create a space for people to deconstruct and reconstruct their faith, some of their thought patterns, and just give everybody a glimpse into my brain, kind of help people think about things differently.